October has ended, which means it's time for another monthly reading wrap-up. Last month I read 6 books, so join me as I tell you what each one is about, why I rated them out of 5 stars, and what I liked and disliked about them. I need to give a pre-warning that I promise that I'm not being a hater in this video. I just did not particularly have a great month of reading because I didn't really enjoy the majority of these books. But let me know if you agree with my opinions, or if you disagree and think that I'm the problem, it's me. And if you're new to the channel, hello, I'm Katerina. It is lovely to see you here. I make new videos every week talking about books, and if that's something you're into, why don't you consider subscribing? And all that being said, let's get into the video. So the very first book I read in the month of October was A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. I'm sure the book talk girlies will be thrilled that I finally picked up the next book. And honestly, I was craving some fantasy. And smut. Just kidding. Maybe. So this is the 4th book in the ACOTAR series, and it's set during the highly celebrated winter solstice, which is the human equivalent of Christmas. And we follow the main character, Feyre, and her close family and friends essentially rebuilding their lives after the war. In this book, for the first time, we see perspectives from different characters, showing how they're dealing with the loss and conflict following the war. And overall, this book focuses on themes of healing, hope, and connection to those that are close to us. And I gave this book 2 stars, which is the lowest rating I've given for any book in this series, but I will explain why. Okay, so starting off with things I liked. Trying to be positive. I enjoyed that we finally got perspectives from different characters because honestly, by the end of the 3rd book, as much as I liked the main character, she was starting to bore me a bit. She basically just had the same thoughts on loop and it was getting repetitive. So to hear different monologues from other characters was honestly so refreshing. I particularly loved Cassian's because he's my favourite character. If you know, you know. And I also liked how for the first time, this book wasn't just centered around war and battle strategy because that was my biggest grief with the last book. It felt lighter and it explored more aspects from that universe that we hadn't seen before. Plus, kudos to the author for exploring the aftermaths of war and how that affects people, because that's honestly not something we see enough in literature, even though so many people in the world are literally going through that. However, unlike all the other huge mammoth books in the ACOTAR series, this was comically short. Like, it was literally 200 pages. I don't have the books on me now, but here's a picture of the 4th and the 5th book side by side. Like, look at that size difference. And honestly, nothing happened in terms of plot. It was honestly just filler content. I get people saying that it's meant to be a more cozy and intimate look at the characters, but like, why not just divvy up these chapters and put them at either side of books 3 and 5? The books are massive anyway, it wouldn't hurt just to have some extra chapters on either end, especially when there's no plot development. Like, it feels wasted just to have a single book on this. I really hate to say it because I don't want it to be true, but it really just felt like a money grab from the publisher to do this. Like, I finished it just being like, what was the reason?
What was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the
I just explained.
reason?
I also hate the protagonist's sister, Nesta, so much. Like, she just pisses me off. She's absolutely insufferable, and I really just don't think she should get as much screen time or page time in this case as she does. That being said, I did read a preview chapter of the last book in this one, and I enjoyed it, so I am going to be reading the last book. So stay tuned to hear my thoughts on that. As October is the month of Halloween, I wanted a spooky read next, so the second book I read was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I actually picked this up because I wanted to watch the TV show, but I thought, let's read the source material first. This is a gothic horror novel that follows 4 people visiting a haunted house to explore its mysterious history and its alleged paranormal activity. One of these people who brought them all together is an investigator in the supernatural, and the other 3 people include the heir to the house, a bohemian artist, and a young woman who is a carer for her disabled mother, and it's this character that the book focuses on. And whilst they're there, the house reveals its true nature through a series of disturbing events. Unfortunately, I continue to be disappointed this month because I rated this book 2 stars. Sorry, I need to start off with things I actually disliked about the book first. This was not scary in the slightest. If anything, it was actually mind-numbingly boring. Like, I was itching to finish this book. The scariest thing that happened was that the characters came across like a mysterious draft and there was some banging on the walls. And if we're classing that as scary, then my flat may as well just be considered haunted at this point. I'm tempted to write a book called The Haunting of Katerina's Flat because apparently we've got a bestseller on our hands. The characters as well were just so irritating and ridiculous. Like, their dialogue throughout the whole book just made the whole thing just felt very unserious. I had to seriously question whether if I was meant to be reading a horror or actually just some satirical comedy. But no, it was apparently meant to be a horror, and I just personally just thought thought this book was not for me. Don't get me wrong, there were some aspects of the book I actually did like. There would be a phenomenal page of writing here and there that just absolutely slapped, and that's the reason why I didn't end up giving it 1 star. Like, one of my favorite lines in the book is, "No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality." Like, okay. And also this one, "Fear is the relinquishment of logic. The willing relinquishing of reasonable patterns. We yield to it or we fight it, but we cannot meet it halfway." Like, 10 out of 10. Those are some incredible lines. It's just a shame that the whole book sucked. That being said, I have heard that the TV show is very different, so I am still going to be watching that. And also, when I posted the review of this book on my Instagram, loads of people messaged me saying they actually agreed with me, but that other books that Shirley Jackson have made are way better. So I will try reading some of her other stuff because I am very open to changing my mind on her. As my craving for spooky content wasn't satisfied, the third book I picked up was Wayward by Emilia Clarke. This novel, set in England, spans across different timelines of past and current, and it follows 3 women. One in the present day, the second in the 1940s, and the third in the 1610s. Quite a throwback. And all of these women are connected by their lineage as well as their secret ties to witchcraft. And the story essentially explores their abuse at the hands of men as well as fighting against societal norms and oppressions of that time. The themes are heavy in this one, so trigger warning, it includes patriarchal oppression and domestic abuse. And carrying on my apparent theme of being a hater, I gave this book 2.5 stars. This wasn't a great month for reading, but I do promise the reviews get better as the video goes on. One of the things I liked about this novel was the exploration into female strength and resilience, especially drawing attention to sensitive topics like domestic abuse and showing how difficult it can be for the victims to escape these situations, and how male abuse can come in different forms. It's not always the cookie-cut way that society expects it to be, such as one of the examples is how seemingly supporting family members can actually be very abusive, which I thought was a rare and bold take. However, that is literally the only thing that this book is about. It's just women suffering again and again at the hands of men over hundreds of years. And whilst it is important to draw attention to these issues, it was exhausting to read as it was the only thing that the book dwelled on. I felt like this book was marketed as like an enchanting witchy tale of powerful women, but honestly, it was just really depressing. Like, if I want to see women suffering at the hands of men, I can just turn on the news. I don't need to read a long drawn out novel about it. I think personally it would have been fine for me if these women had like revenge or redemption, but there was just none of that. And the moral of the story just kind of felt like, oh, men can just get away with these acts and they will do in future, and it's just women who continue to suffer, which I guess would have been fine to write about, but don't market it as like a witchy, whimsical and magical tale. Oh, because another thing, there was literally no magic in it. All it had was like some insects and animals come closer to these women compared to other humans, but that was literally it. I'm not expecting cauldrons and flying brooms, but come on, give me something. If you know any better witchy reads, let me know, because I'm starving for some witchy content and this book was a no from me. Giving up on spooky reads for the month, I then turned to existentialism, the natural pipeline. So the next book I read in October was The Stranger by Camus. This novel is narrated by a French-Algerian man who is emotionally detached from everything, and he navigates through his life with a profound indifference to everything and everyone. However, this disinterest and passivity in the world actually leads him committing a murder. He then has to face a trial, and he's therefore forced to confront the consequences of his actions. This book is full of existential themes, including societal norms, the human condition, and moral judgment. And I rated this book 3 stars. I did say the reviews get better, even if not by much. I honestly took so long deciding what to rate this book because I had such mixed feelings. Firstly, this novel had one of the best opening lines I have ever read in a book. Like, listen to this. "My mother died today. Or maybe yesterday. I can't be sure." Like, sorry. Okay, well done on opening with that corker of a line because I am sat and ready to read. I also liked it because as someone who is very emotional, it was compelling to read the perspective of someone who is just so detached. I don't know, we see a lot of psychopaths in media and it's intriguing to get a look inside their heads and how this emotional detachment just shows them viewing the world with this such disinterest. And also because I have a legal background, I actually really enjoyed the courtroom scenes in the novel and how it just depicted the arbitrary nature of justice, which therefore led to a really emotional and striking final chapter of just the absurdity of life, which was honestly the best part of the book. However, the majority of the book was boring. Apart from the courtroom scenes and the final chapter, everything was just dull. It was all described in just a very mundane way. It was just like, I did this, and then I went to do that, and then I wanted to see this person, then I went to go do that, and then I saw this for like 200 pages. I understand that this was maybe trying to show how unemotional he is, but this distant narrative was just a drag to read. Like, if I knew this guy in real life, I would be telling my friends not to leave their drinks around him. Like, he is just someone I would avoid and not really like. And because of that, I just didn't really care when it came to his trial, and I just didn't really empathize with him. I've since read reviews saying that this is like a great piece on existentialism and the meaning of life, but honestly, where? The author only showed a really small glimpse of this in the final few pages, but for the rest of the book, it was just naff. I don't know, maybe I had too high expectations going into this, but I honestly thought the book was okay, but really kind of underwhelming. For the fifth book I read last month, I actually picked up Why Men Love Bitches by Sherry Argov. Before I get into this, I need to caveat that I initially read this book as a joke. I would never willingly buy a book with the word bitch in it, but I know that this book was very popular in the early 2000s, and I found it in a charity shop for £1, and I put a poll on my Instagram being like, should I read it? And the majority said yes, so here we are. So this is a self-help book that actually positively redefines the term bitch to really just meaning a self-respecting, independent woman who knows her worth, and someone who doesn't obsess over the opinions of others, especially men's, like slay, I want to be that. The book also explores heterosexual relationship dynamics and how women can adopt techniques in setting boundaries in order to gain romantic interest and respect from men. I also had mixed feelings about this book, and I rated it 3 stars. Okay, so where to begin on this? This book honestly had a lot of good advice for women who I would say lack assertiveness and get walked all over. And I'll admit, this includes me. I can be too nice, and in the past, people have taken advantage of that. So I rated this book on encouraging strength and confidence in women to basically grow a backbone. It also had a lot of commentary on decentering men and focusing on your own social life and hobbies, which I know sounds counterproductive to this book's goal, but the author explains it in that men love the chase. And apparently they like women who are focused on themselves because it gives them a thrill in getting her. That being said, it's very obvious that this book was written in 2002 because quite a hefty chunk of it was very outdated. Like, it literally mentions fax machines at one point, which I had to Google what they look like because I just didn't know. And the dating scene has changed so much since this book has come out. Like, we now have social media and dating apps. And also, whilst there was a lot of really good advice in promoting independence and confidence, there were some sections about interacting with men that I just really disagreed with because it encouraged toxic behavior, and honestly, I can't be asked playing silly games like that when it comes to dating. Like, I felt like a lot of the advice given only really worked on shitty men who liked playing these games. And I would actually say to rename this book Why Toxic Men Love Bitches. Like, some of the advice literally encourages straight up lying and playing dumb in some scenarios, and it's like, girl, it's 2024. Women have had enough. If men don't like us for being honest and nice, then they can just bore off. I would quite literally rather die a spinster than date a toxic man who would end up falling for these sort of techniques. Overall, I liked this book because I felt like it did give me good advice in being more confident, but at the end of the day, I think I probably still will remain single from toxic men because the book's advice when it came to that just was not it. And finally, the sixth and final book I read in the month of October was actually the fifth book in the ACOTAR series, which is A Cult of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. As I said, thank God that the previous book had a preview chapter of this, otherwise I don't think I would have ever picked this book up because it's also like 800 pages. This girl is big, so I need to make sure that I'm worthily investing my time. So this is the latest book that's published in the ACOTAR series, and we followed the perspective of the main character's sister, Nesta, as well as Cassian, who is another Fae warrior and also the love of my life. And the novel mainly focuses around Nesta and her grappling with a lot of guilt and trauma from her life. And it's really a story of her recovery and self-acceptance as she faces internal challenges as well as external political threats. It also shows her complex journey with Cassian, who is helping her heal. And the book is heavy in themes of resilience, the process of healing, and the power of family and friends. And we can all breathe a sigh of relief that I finished this month on a high because I rated this book 4.0 4.5 stars. Finally, I can talk about a book positively for once in this video. Oh my god. I know I slagged off Nesta in the previous book, but honestly, her character development in this book was divine. Because this book finally allows us to hear her inner thought processes, it finally makes sense why she was being such a dick in the previous books. I honestly wish that they explored this earlier, but like I get why it lent into better character development if they showed it here. And I actually surprisingly liked her as a main character. Like Feyre was fine, but she was a little bit boring, whereas like Nesta has some spice to her. And I absolutely adore Cassian. I think he's probably my favorite character in the series. I just love a muscular and unserious man. And the chemistry these two have, I might even go as far to say that this is my favorite enemies to lovers in any book that I've ever read. Speaking of lovers, this brings me on to the shocking amount of smut this book has. In the previous books, they had like a chapter here and there of intimate scenes and that'll be about it, but oh my god, this book had chapters and chapters and chapters of it. To the point where I didn't allow myself to bring this book in public because I got so worried that someone would be reading over my shoulder being like, this girl is filthy. And I can promise, even with all that aside, the plot was really good. Like there were some action scenes that left me having chills because it was so good. I felt like it's been so long since I've read a book that I was really gripped by. It gave me that like childhood nostalgic feeling of like when you're really excited about a book and you just want to find out what happens. But the main reason I'm not giving this 5 stars is because the villain's motivations were starting to feel very repetitive. In every single book, there's always like, oh no, there's some being who has more power than us that wants to rule the world. And it's like, come on, give me a fresh villain with new motivations and maybe even someone that I can empathize with. And also, this is something I've mentioned before, but there never feels like there's any stakes in these books. No one ever dies. And if anyone does die, then they're just brought back to life. At least in the Harry Potter books, people always die, so you would genuinely stress when reading it whether your favourite characters were going to survive or not. Whereas when I was reading these books, I was just like, I'm sure they'll live. And they did. But overall, I'm just thankful that I ended this book on a high because I really enjoyed this book. And yeah, overall, just finally happy that I finished the series. And there you have it. Those are all the books I read in the month of October. Overall, not a great month of reading, but you know what? These are all books I've been wanting to read for a while. So I am glad that I finally got around to them and I've just managed to form my own opinion on them. Have you read any of these books? If so, what did you think of them? And if not these ones, what books did you read in the month of October? If you like this video, please give it a like down below. It really helps me out. And if you're new here, why don't you consider subscribing? Like I said, I make new videos about books every single Tuesday. Also, feel free to follow me on Goodreads. I will link my account down below and I will also link my Instagram. I post more personal stuff on there, but I also post about books as soon as I finish reading them so you can see what they're about and also what I've rated them. And that being said, thank you so much for being here. I hope that November's reading wrap up will be a bit more positive than this one, but we shall see. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!